welcome to today's AMA, where we'll be talking about Binance IEOs, yield farming, and NFTs. I'm your host, Mel Vera, and joining us are rockstar speakers. Tascha from Alpha Finance Labs, Aleksander from Axie Infinity, and Injective's very own Chen. Guys, thanks for being here with us. I'd like to start out by having each of you introduce yourselves and your projects. Tascha, we'll start with you. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and the mission behind Alpha Finance?
Sure. So I went to UC Berkeley, studied economics, and came from a more traditional finance background. I did investment banking in San Francisco and then in London before pivoting to Tencent as a product manager, and then pivot again to join Binance Protocol as the head of strategy to really look deeper into, expanding the Oracle usages across DeFi. And then I left Binance Protocol to start Alpha Finance Lab with also my colleague Nipun. And in terms of Alpha Finance Lab itself, we are a cross-chain DeFi lab. What that means is we're building a number of DeFi products on multiple chains. The problems that we're really solving is on two levels. First is that we're going to spin out a number of DeFi products to really capture the market gaps and grow from there. And we really think that, DeFi space moves really, really fast. So that's why we are taking this approach of capturing multiple market gaps that we see and then grow from there. And the second level is pretty much the multiple alpha products that we will build and have launched, is that they're going to work together and become, the ideal financial product suite that we think is an ideal one, which is pretty much how do you maximize returns while minimize downside exposure. So the multiple alpha products will work together and achieve that, overarching theme of maximizing returns and minimize downside exposure.
Wow, that's awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Tascha. And moving on to Aleksander, Axie is on a mission to lead a movement that empowers millions of gamers by breaking the barriers between work and play. Could you tell us a little bit more about this mission and what brought you to Axie?
Thanks. Yeah, happy to be here and talk a little bit about what we're doing at Axie. So to start off, our team actually met playing CryptoKitties early in 2018, and we pretty much set out on a mission to build something amazing because we realized that NFTs were probably going to change the way that games are being played forever and the possibilities that they enable. So with Axie, we first wanted to make a very simple game to onboard millions of users to the blockchain. And then we realized how insanely hard it is to build a good game that's utilizing the great things that blockchain technology enables. So for example, player-owned economies and also integrating yield farming into this. So that's very briefly about Axie. We're really seeing a lot of traction right now in terms of significant amount of users who are not only playing the game, but they're also living inside the game, using this as their income source. So it's quite amazing to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks, Aleksander. And last but not least, we'll go to Eric. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you came to start Injective and what your overall vision is for the company?
Yeah, so Injective started off as kind of like a research project. We want to focus on building essentially a fully decentralized order book with no security issues when it comes to any type of race condition. So back then we were kind of struggling a lot with 0x virtual settlement model. Just in general, for the case of Ether Delta and stuff like that, there's a lot of front running issues, and we actually start seeing it more and more on a higher stake these days. But so back then it was already becoming like a kind of like a hidden threat. So we kind of started off as utilizing VDF to resolve all the front running issues and also establish anti-collision measures to make sure that the order book is always consistent and it's always stable. But Injective has evolved a lot since the past 2 years. So we kind of saw that this entire ecosystem, we kind of decided to hone in on specifically building a fully decentralized derivatives exchange and build out like an entire ecosystem, including Injective Chain, Injective Futures, and the Injective Exchange infrastructure to make sure that every single one of the component is built on top of a single purpose chain that can bring the best possible user experience and just in general flexibility for traders and for market makers together.
Oh, wow, that's super exciting. Thanks, Eric. Well, guys, let's get down to it. Both the DeFi and NFT sectors are growing rapidly. However, it seems like they are largely siloed from one another. Alexander, Axie has been growing rapidly within the NFT space, and Tascha, I know that you've been looking deeply in the DeFi markets. Eric, I know Injective seeks to bridge these two spaces together through cross-chain trading. I'd like to open up the space for you all to converse together about the about the synergies you see between these two industries and how you seek to bring them together. What bottlenecks do you foresee hampering growth within the DeFi and NFT space as a whole? Feel free to converse within each other.
Sure, I can start. I think NFT is really interesting, and I also am really excited myself on what Axie Infinity is doing, and I think the bridge between NFT and DeFi will continue to grow. How I think of it though is that with tokenized value of these NFTs, you already have intrinsic value that you can measure, right? Maybe like the lands of on Axie, or other artistic value for other NFT projects. But I think the hard part, in my opinion, is to really know like what's the actual value of these. Because let's say if it's the typical tokens that you can trade on exchanges, then the market would determine what's the price, right? So if the price difference from the actual price, then people will arbitrage it. But then in this case for NFT, the question becomes like, what's the actual price, right? Because technically one piece of land is not that fungible as of now. So I think as we continue to grow both DeFi and also NFT, the interesting part will be how do you really like value the NFT so that it is fungible. And once it becomes fungible, then I think the bridge between NFT and DeFi will be even more prominent. So you can actually use these NFTs as collateral on different DeFi projects because for sure these are the values that are trading at for this NFT token. So that is something that I'm really looking forward to. So kind of want to hear Aleksander's thoughts on.
Yeah, thanks, Tascha. I think you are catching on to something that's very interesting. And basically, the root of what you're trying to say, if I'm understanding you correctly, is how do you determine the intrinsic value of an NFT? And in, for example, the Axie Infinity universe, you can very easily see that there are like revenue streams that are tied to a specific asset. So if you own 3 Axies, for example, you can harvest a set amount of resources in the game, and then you can turn those resources into tokens and then interact with the DeFi space. So this token in Axie's case is called Small Love Potions. And that has some very interesting things happening in terms of the effects, right? So we see a significant amount of growth, for example, for people who come in specifically to farm these assets, right? They're very extrinsically motivated. So it's a little bit different from what you see in normal games, right? Versus intrinsic motivation where they just come because they love the game, for example. But then again, in Axie, we have those too, right? So it doesn't explain why people are spending up to 130,000 USD for one Axie, right? Because those don't have, you can't say that, okay, this Axie is going to cost 130,000, is going to produce revenue streams that makes the ROI very clear, right? So there you have the prestige, right, for these NFTs, and that's the same thing for art. But what we've seen in Axie is that some people are already creating certain products or more financial products, like wrapped origin Axie, which is basically going down to the fungible aspect of some NFTs and trying to say that this is the root value, right? So you can say that, for example, there are only 4,000 of this specific Axie type in existence. That's the fungible thing, and that means that you can use them in various financial products. So that opens up for some interesting things for the DeFi space. But more generally speaking, for NFTs and the challenges that we're facing, I would say the different thing from the DeFi space is that it's very expensive to use certain interactions with NFTs. And while, yeah, you have very expensive interactions on DeFi and ERC20 tokens, you can more easily do roll-ups or scale on layer 2s than you can do for NFTs in general. So that's a little bit challenging, and I think we'll see some very big changes coming there soon. And that's also why we are doing things on our own sidechain, because we are a strong believer that it's just going to be too hard to find a certain layer 2 that everything is going to be on immediately. So I think we're going to see some fragmentation first, and then things are going to be gathering up hopefully later once the things are a little bit more efficient. So that's my take on the opportunities that are for NFTs, and then also the challenges that we're seeing right now. So I'm curious what you think about that, Eric, because I know you guys are a little bit looking into the NFT space for some products as well.
Yeah, I think the first part, the most interesting part is that Tascha kind of mentioned about kind of making the NFTs a little bit more fungible, essentially kind of bringing that middle ground between like a fully fungible token versus like a non-fungible token. So my co-founder actually used to work on a similar type of token standard, which is kind of like a multi-class non-fungible token. So there's like it's composable between like an NFT and also like it can be also decomposed into like a ERC20 token standard. And I think the token standard he worked on was used by Loon Network, so which is also interestingly like a gaming chain as well. But like back then the space was still pretty early. This was like way before Injective days, so I would say like late 2017, early 2018. So like this space is a lot more different of what it looks like now, and we're actually thinking about picking that standard back up, kind of like refining it for our current, tokenized derivative platform. So that's something that's pretty interesting to touch on as well. And just in general for NFT and also DeFi, I feel like they kind of share an element of a certain kind of like a gamifying aspect, obviously to a different extent, essentially. I would say that, like right now there's a really strong like gaming motif within DeFi in a sense. Like there's a really fun themes around it. There's sushi, cream, and everything that's trying to make DeFi as fun as possible. And obviously, gaming is trying to do the same. So I think there's going to be a lot of conversions just by the will of the users alone. On the other hand, I would say that attaching value to gaming items has been a tremendously kind of like a powerful driver. And it's going to be a major industry, especially as we kind of make it more liquid. So one of the good examples, I'm trying to remember which exact game this is, but essentially the in-game currency is translatable to real world value. And there were like in-game items and also, infrastructure that cost $70,000 to $100,000. And sometimes, a single battle could cost, upwards of $700,000. So it's actually extremely interesting that once these values within games are being converged into a more flexible financial infrastructure, what's going to happen and how exactly that's going to like turn out for the greater ecosystem.
Yeah, the games you're mentioning, either it's EVE Online or Entropia Universe, both have kind of similar aspects where NFTs unique digital assets, I guess we can say. NFTs is just a fancy word of saying that. So yeah, I definitely think that you guys are touching on the things that we are also thinking about in terms of yield farming, which is basically just a way to market your product. And here I have a contrarian take for all you guys, I think, who are DeFi fans, because I do believe we probably have a lot more of that than gaming fans for now. So what I believe is that it's actually going to be easier for gaming projects to utilize the yield farming in terms of using the tokens that actually belong to your product to actually do marketing, because the people who get these tokens, they have a more emotional connection to the games rather than a financial protocol. So I think probably one of the most difficult things for financial protocols, whatever it might be, is to differentiate yourself in a clear way. So people don't just get the tokens, they come for liquidity purely as kind of sharks. They want to exploit your systems and then just pull out immediately. So I think that's actually an advantage for games, but the advantage, of course, for DeFi is that there's clear product market fit. It's easier to find specific products that just make sense right now in terms of tapping into an open financial infrastructure, which basically is Ethereum. But hopefully for gaming, we're going to see some big changes coming in the next year or two. So
this is ringing a lot of Ready Player One bells. I think our viewers have a lot to look forward to then. So Aleksander, Axie announced last month a partnership with Aave for users to earn Aave. Axie is currently the only Ethereum-based NFT project with over 10,000 monthly active users, surpassing CryptoKitties and changing the lives of many. Could you share some more about the play-to-earn revolution and how it will change the future of gaming?
Sure. I mean, for Axie right now, it's over 15,000. So
oh, wow.
The growth is, it's kicking off quite heavily. So in terms of the play to earn revolution, I think it's clear what's going to happen in the next coming years. What we're trying to do is to give the players some kind of ownership of the items and all, by extension also their digital identity. So what that means is, what I believe is that whenever you're interacting with a product online, you will get some kind of badge or some kind of proof that you did it, and then you're able to bring it with you. And the same goes for all kind of game items that you do. And whether or not you can use them in different games or you can just have them with you as a proof of something that you did, I think that's up to the game developers in the future. But for play to earn more specifically, I think what everyone who is making something like Axie, what we're trying to do is more a very blockchainized game with a truly open economy. It's all about how can you make this into something that is actually sustainable for the long term. So what we're doing now is basically we are letting people harvest an early token inside our game, or a resource to breed Axies. And that's a good way for us to do experimentation. So we have many different tokens, but for the small love potion, we can see very specifically when people are coming in, they are trying to abuse our systems by, for example, having automated things inside our game. So botting, right? Everything is about finding things that are Sybil resistant. And then in the end, you have to prove if you are a human being, right? So human beings in every system have a lot more value to bring than every kind of robot, or even if human beings are playing on multiple accounts. So in terms of play to earn, sure, you can earn tokens inside the ecosystem, but that also means that you have to bring value back. And that value can be as easy as chatting with other players, or if you're telling your friends, or if you are creating content, or spending money. All of these things combined equal to the value that one human being brings to a network or ecosystem. So that is play to earn in my view. You put something in and you get something in return, and then you can bring that with you to whatever it is that you're doing, and then building a new IP at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that, Aleksander. I'd like to open the space up for you all to converse about the risks that worry you about the advancement of this aspect of the industry. What can we do to reduce these risks? Eric, maybe?
Which aspect?
Oh, the aspect of gaming and the gaming industry with NFTs and the blockchain space.
Yeah, I would say that's like pretty broad in a sense. I could already see a lot of different attack vectors. But just in general, to say that, the convergence of DeFi and NFT, it would bring a lot of kind of like essentially like a value attack, where essentially the value of an NFT, especially for sometimes in-game items, and also, let's say, some of the unique collectible items, could be fairly risky to hold, and especially when it's used as collateral in like a kind of like an uneducated manner, that would cause a lot of liquidation, which it's something that we don't want to see. But that being said, if we have a pretty robust and safe consideration when it comes to mechanism design, people can mitigate that risk a lot. But obviously, we've seen DeFi so far, and we're kind of lacking on that.
Yeah, agree. And as these two industries are growing, DeFi and NFT, I think what's even more important is having this economic audit. So coding audit is we have a number of firms out there. Only a few of them are doing a good job. So now we are, lacking the firms that can also do economic audit, which is a lot harder because you need to understand not only the code, you need to understand how it works, understand the product, understand, thinking through what the attackers would would do, and pretty much game the system. So I think it's really, really difficult. And I think if any of the audit firm can crack this economic audit, I think they're gonna, win the game by many, many years. Yeah.
I think that's super scary, not only for DeFi products, but as actually value grows within any ecosystem, people are abusing as much as they can. So we see that in Axie as well, as I mentioned, with robots or with butters and even like farming stations. but I mean, these are just minuscule things compared to the amount of value that's at risk in the DeFi space. So yeah, I definitely agree that that's a risk factor, and hopefully things will change.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Moving on, Tascha, in October, Alpha Finance launched the new yield farm Alpha Homora on Ethereum. Yesterday, you announced that you now support the leverage yield farming of SushiSwap, ETH /EFI pool, amongst others. Please share with us what the main pain points Alpha Homora hopes to target and how.
Sure. So my answer would fall into, two parts. The first part will talk on more, how Alpha Homora solves the problems and what we're solving. And the second part is on more of the Alpha Finance Lab, because Alpha Homora is only one of our products. We're building a number of products. And, from Alpha Finance Lab point of view, what we're trying to solve. So for the Alpha Homora wise, the market gaps that we saw and we tackled are pretty much a number of things. One is that there are a number of ETH holders bearing low interest rate on ETH. I'm sure if you ask any of the ETH holders, they're not going to say they want low interest rate on ETH. So that's already a huge market gap that we can solve, right? The second issue is that there are still a lot of yield farmers out there trying to search for the high yields because they are used to the high yields, back in July, the 4-digit yields. So they're trying to find a way to lever up and earn higher yields. So Alpha Homora tap into these and solve these two problems in a sense that it allows leveraged yield farmers or leveraged liquidity providers to actually take on leverage in their position. And what that means is they are borrowing the ETH from Alpha Homora to add into their position. And as a result, the ETH lenders who are lending these ETH are getting really high lending interest rate on ETH without having to go through the risk of impermanent loss or risk of anything. So just mainly normal lending risk that the other lending protocols also bear. So, as of now, we give out about 8% of lending interest rate on ETH, which is 8 times higher than the other lending protocols. And we just announced earlier before this talk as well, the collaboration with Aave. So what we're working with Aave in terms of the integration and partnership is on the front that people who are lending on Aave can actually use those assets as collateral and then borrow the ETH from Aave and pay, the 1% interest rate for borrowing ETH on Aave, and then you can lend those ETH on Alpha Homora and get 8%. So you already gained that gap. Plus you get the deposit APY for depositing and lending other assets. And we just automate all of these from our Alpha Homora front end and make it, 3 simple steps for users. So that's for the Alpha Homora part and, what problems we're solving. But for the Alpha Finance Lab part, which I touched upon earlier in terms of how we are looking to build a number of products that will work together to not only maximize returns like Alpha Homora, but also help minimize the downside exposure. So the second product, which is coming up, is also in the perpetual swap area. So I think next year is going to be really interesting. We're also excited for Injective. And we have also, used your testnet already. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting year next year for perpetual swap and how we look to integrate our perpetual swap product with Alpha Homora is pretty much that it will allow Alpha Homora users to take the opposite position and hedge their, their IL, pretty much their impermanent loss or their shorting ETH position. So they are, at the end of the day, it's going to be market neutral leverage position that they are entering at.
That's super exciting. Thanks. I'd like to open up the space to discuss about the sustainability of yield farming. And I'd also like to hear from Eric and Aleksander. If you could please share your thoughts on Alpha Homora and what you'd like to see come from it.
Yeah, I'll go first. So basically, I feel like yield farming just in general is a really, really cool like mechanism design. And the design of it, kind of like the philosophy behind it is to distribute as much governance and basically the right to control the network to the community. And it's a very fair measure to distribute it because it goes by the actual usage or the actual state of the community. There are some, imperfection that we see over the course of the past few months. Number one is just, it's kind of like the rich gets richer issue, where essentially, like large VC funds or like large funds could go in and stake and earn a lot of tokens, and active community participants might not actually get proportional share of their token. But there's never really like a perfect solution to that, and so it's going to be an active kind of direction or open question for the mechanism design that we want to figure out. I would say like the second part is just in general, we want to have like a net positive accrual in value for the token. And obviously, as we slowly start seeing, there's a lot of, due to the increasing supply for liquidity mining, the token, the token price or like, the token value itself might not sustain that well. But obviously, we started seeing a lot of mechanisms to try to maintain the value of the token to make it, worth it for some of the earlier holders, especially as the total token supply expands. So I feel like just in general, it's good for us to keep experimenting. It's good for us to keep trying new things. And in terms of, leverage yield, especially for Alpha Homora, that's something that's super exciting, actually. We've been thinking about it for a while as well, especially from a perpetual swap and like futures perspective. And basically, there are some, trickiness that we're trying to work out when it comes to, what is the incentive for someone to try to take on the short side? In our case, we're going to be probably going to be building out like a yield index where essentially someone can take on the short side and they'll replicate it, on chain with a certain premium or a certain discount. So basically, we want to find out like the sufficient pricing model for what's the optimal discount for it, because essentially for us, in a sense, it's almost like a market maker kind of matching their position and like kind of finding a counterparty that's like a smaller but higher risk preference holder. So the balance of that market, how we work it out, it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it seems like you have some issues with your camera. I'm not sure exactly. Hopefully that should be okay. Hopefully you're not blowing up over there. But I mean, I'm not sure if we're still running. Hawk,
yes.
Are we still live?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're still live. Okay, great. Sure. So then I'll give my opinion on yield farming, and I briefly mentioned it already. I think yield farming is great for token distribution, and it's amazing to reward those who actually believe in your product to use it. And you also mentioned the downside of it, basically that it's too much on the capital side, that the large token holders, they benefit too greatly in terms of what they are providing to value to the network, right? So for Axie, we have I think a pretty elegant solution to this in terms of when people are playing the game, right? So if you play the Axie game, or when you play it in the future, you will be able to find the our token, which is called Access or AXS. And the way that you can get more yield on that is if you stake it inside our ecosystem. But the only way that you can get more or get truly high rewards is if you play at the same time as you stake. So you need to also play and then at the same time vote, right? So if you don't do these things, then you will get diluted because other people are getting staking rewards. And I think that's a way to ensure that everyone is actually adding some kind of value to the network. And then you can say the counter argument would be, well, if I'm a big investor, I don't want to play a game. I just want to invest and I just want to get yield. We have a solution to that too. Well, you can delegate your work to other players. So imagine if you have a guild inside the game where you are staking a lot of tokens, then you have the workers working under you who are providing these points so that you can actually generate yield. And at the same time, then you are providing value to the ecosystem by being an employer, right? So these are things that are very gamified and on purpose. And I think we'll see some very interesting things happening there in the long term. And that's actually tied directly into Alpha Finance and not specifically to Alpha Homora as a product, because I'm not a finance guy specifically. I care mostly about games and how to align the incentives there. But what I'm interested in is when will we see DeFi yield-seeking products trying to extract yield from games, for example? Because that's actually what's happening, right? Inside Axie, as I said, you already have companies who are forming these guilds or scholarships, as they're called. So they are hiring other players to work for them using these Axies as yield-bearing NFTs. So I think in the future, I mean, we're just seeing the very, very early beginnings of how an interconnected financial system will be on Ethereum, most likely, but probably also cross-chain where people are working together, and yield will be extracted where it can be. And I think that's also, it's great to see, because that means that we need to become better as a platform, and the same goes for everyone who has a platform, to protect its interest and to ensure that whenever people are extracting yield, they are also giving something in return to that platform, whatever it might be. So I'm incredibly excited, but I can't say specifically, oh, Alpha Homora is going to be great because of perpetual swaps, because I just it's not something that I'm passionate about.
Understand. Yeah, I think the relationship between NFT and DeFi will continue to be more interesting, as they're, solve, as you like Axie or other NFT projects solve the multiple issues through NFT, and then growing the demand for NFT. Then as DeFi solve the security issue and hopefully get more audit firms who can actually audit economic, issues, then I think when we merge, that would be something pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, guys. So, Eric, in the last 2 days, Injective announced its Solstice testnet launch. What can the community expect to see, and what are your personal favorite features of the exchange?
Yeah, super excited to launch the testnet, because it's been something that we've been working on for months and months. And honestly, I'm really surprised by like the volume and kind of like how much interest it was showing, because usually I kind of just expected testnet to be just kind of like a small community event where some of them are just going to try it out and then just forget about it. But actually the volume has been like really crazy, and we actually had to upgrade a lot of our like existing node infrastructure to accommodate just by the sheer of like queries. So that was pretty crazy. But yeah, like just in general, I would say like the community can expect to see new markets added every week, and as we experiment with more and more interesting stuff, because right now we're just doing perpetual swaps, which is kind of like our core mechanism. I would say that's like the core mechanism for most of derivatives exchanges. And one thing that we really pride ourselves in is the fact that we can parameterize the futures market really easily. So that means that we can spin up a market. Let's say, there's a new token called, silver coin that's like coming up. We can spin up a market like that, really rapidly parameterize it properly with the right risk levels, and just spawn it within the matter of an hour or 5 minutes if we already have everything figured out. So that's something that we're super excited about. But obviously, the reason why we're using the testnet right now is to figure out what's the optimal parameter for all the margin ratios, some of the specific features that we've been like trying to add on. So I would say that the next week we're going to have a pretty exciting market coming out. So definitely stay tuned to that. And kind of like the week, I would say very, very soon we're going to have like a trading competition out as well. So that's when, everyone is kind of like incentivized on like very close to real world money. So that's when, we can see kind of like the trading behavior becoming more normalized. And we actually do the trading competition a little bit later from our early access for a reason, is because we want to catch all the edge cases. So we actually, if you look at our chart right now on our exchange, there's a lot of scam wicks. Like some of them just go up to like, 10x the price, some of them just goes to zero. We actually want to use those opportunities to test, almost as like a free agent-based simulation to see, if there's anything that's failing, if our bots are catching everything, if liquidations are working as intended. And so that's something I'm always really excited about. And in terms of features, I would say that right now, the most interesting one would be, well, I want to say that every part of it is, because we poured everything into building every part of the feature. So It's very hard to say specifically which part, but if I were to list, it would be, the fact that we can cross between all the markets. So essentially, right now, the position netting has been working really phenomenally. Before we started off as every position is as isolated model, and we were always worried about, if all the positions within the same market are crossed, what are possible wrong things that could happen, especially given that we're working in a pretty high leverage environment. So that feature is actually, is actually as close as you could get with, as like a traditional derivatives exchange. And the next feature we're working on is, having specific linkages between markets with the same collateral set. So this way you can like cross and hedge between all those markets. So I would say that's like super interesting because it kind of opens the gateway for a lot of, really interesting trading techniques. Another really interesting part I would say is that just like the number of oracles that we've been working on, like integrating. Right now, we're kind of like pulling from, for example, directly from the source of Binance. But slowly, we're going to be like moving towards, decentralized oracles, and there's already been a few oracle solutions that are already deploying their contracts on Injective, and I'm super excited about. And slowly over time, we're going to have like a very, very robust like Oracle ecosystem just on a single purpose chain, which is probably haven't really been thoroughly done before.
That's awesome. I'm super excited. I want to open up the space for you all to talk about cross-chain trading, NFTs, and other digital assets. What's the biggest pain point DEX users face? And I'd also like to hear from Tascha and Aleksander what they hope to see come from Injective. So we can start off with Tascha. What do you see are the biggest pain point for DEX users? And
for DEX users, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are multiple things. So when you look at Uniswap itself, even though there is high volume and high trading volume, high liquidity, if you look deeper, a lot of the trading that people would go for Uniswap as opposed to centralized exchange where the price is better would be the tokens that are not listed on decentralized exchange. So maybe like the yield farming tokens, the governance tokens that are too risky or maybe too early in the stage. So those are the pools that are more popular. So I think one thing that I would like to see more is pretty much having these DEX solve the slippage issue and also being able to offer competitive price for even like ETH or BTC tokens, right? Like not the niche tokens. So once we reach that point, I think DEX adoption will continue to grow even a lot higher.
That's awesome. And moving on to Aleksander, what do you expect to see on cross-chain trading with NFTs and other digital assets?
I think as I mentioned, the biggest challenge should be the fact that NFTs are so in a different space, I would say, than ERC20s or fungible assets. So to do that, you have to consider things a little bit differently than, for example, optimistic rollups, which I know Injective is exploring right now. So the thing that we realized when we were doing deep levels of research into all these different scaling solutions. So we actually, Eric interestingly mentioned Loom Network earlier in this call. We actually deployed our early version of Axie Infinity, the land marketplace on Loom Network in January 2019. So we were exploring layer 2 scaling solutions for a really long time. But what we realized specifically for NFT is that there is not really something that works in the same sense that you guys have for ERC20s. So what I would say is that you are lucky in that sense that you have something that works. But for NFTs, it means that it's opening up a very big opportunity for someone like us who is basically trying to capture or are very B2C oriented. So what I can say there is that the interesting thing is where are the users coming from? Who will be the onboarding platform or the onboarding for traditional mainstream users into the blockchain space? And that's exactly what we're trying to do in Axie. And if we can do that in Axie and we can onboard them at the same time into our scaling solution first, then we can very easily shift them over to Ethereum, which is kind of where the end goal is. And at that point, if you guys have figured out the scaling solution for trading, that would be great. Then they can just interact specifically with everything else. So yeah, I think there is a massive opportunity within the NFT space now, but the only people who truly get it are those who have witnessed the problems firsthand. So there are a few, but there are some, and the competition will be fierce. So I'm incredibly excited. But for, as I said, the same solutions doesn't necessarily work for ERC 721 or NFTs as it does for ERC 20. But in the future, it will, I think, with maybe ZK rollups or ZK syncs. I know there are many different ways of doing it, but nothing is really battle tested yet. So we're still early, but yeah, things are improving very drastically.
Yeah, thank you, Aleksander. Eric, if you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think just in general, like scaling solution has been like developed really heavily these days. We started seeing a lot of them going into testnet, going into production. ZK rollout being like technically one of the earliest actually. Basically started seeing a lot of adoption. For example, Loopring, Dex uses them as well. But obviously, the goal for us is to be fully decentralized. So we actually had to slash a few solutions here and there. But obviously, we're still actively looking for, like quote unquote, the perfect solution, essentially. But I feel like we're still going to end up making a lot of trade-offs. And in terms of cross-chain trading, I feel like it's kind of like a defensive mode against, not crowding yourself against from other like kind of like rising star chains or like from other rising layer one communities. Because from my perspective, I used to do a lot of research on, I would say, like a consensus side, especially looked into a lot of layer one protocols back in the day. So really, blockchain itself, just from the base layer infrastructure, is really what gets me really excited. So I definitely don't want to, just because Ethereum is the biggest one and just reject all the other chains, especially all the interoperability solutions like Cosmos or Polkadot, or a lot of the very kind of like unique or niche layer one protocols, or some of them with really interesting mechanisms like Infinity that's launching soon. So yeah, definitely, I feel like cross-chain solution is essentially it won't necessarily be the perfect interoperability solution out there, but it's certainly a defense against isolating yourself within this like ETH community.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So moving on, Tascha, the SCB 10X venture arm of CM, which is a renowned large bank in Thailand, recently banked Alpha Finance. And Aleksander, Axie raised $860,000 in its governance token sale. And Eric, you guys have raised from the likes of Pantera and Binance Labs. How are these investors aiding your terms of accelerating your growth and adoption? We can start with Tascha and move on to Aleksander and then Eric.
Sure. So we have a number of investors. We're focusing on both sides, pretty much the DeFi sides. So those are from the Spartan Group, Multicoin Capital, Defiance Capital, and then a number of angel investors. And these investors, what they are really bringing to the table are a lot of experience and knowledge they have spent in DeFi. So that includes connections, relationships, helping us to connect with a lot of great projects, and also really giving feedback on a number of products. Because we not only build one product, but we are expanding quite heavily. In addition to the perpetual product, which we talked about earlier, we are also building Alpha Homura V2 now. That should be launched pretty up soon as well. And then we already have come up with another idea that kind of brings synergy to our Alpha ecosystem. So that would be the fourth product. So, having connections and relationships with these great investors who have been supporting a lot of amazing projects. So I think that really bring a lot of good feedbacks when we iterate and bounce these ideas with them. And for SCB 10X that you brought up, what they're really helping are on multiple angles. The first is more on what they can help now, right? Because they're a venture arm of a traditional bank. They cannot do anything much in DeFi yet. while they want to. So how they're helping us is pretty much they actually have already sent the developers, the top developers in their team to help us build our alpha products. And in exchange, they are learning more about DeFi, and pretty much they can iterate and incorporate that DeFi aspects into traditional banking. And then, in the long term and down the line, when traditional finance is bridging more with DeFi, then we would tap into this network of SCB 10X that we have.
Awesome, thank you.
But yeah, I think that's super interesting to onboard a very traditional partner into what you guys are doing. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. For Axie specifically, I can say that when we started raising the round, or we were talking about talking to various investors, it was actually a little bit earlier this year, actually in March. It wasn't really a great time, but when we ended up closing the round, we had some seriously heavy hitters on board, like Delphi Digital, who should be quite known in the DeFi space. Same for Arca, Defiance Capital, Three Arrows Capital, Hashed, and Dialectic. So everyone was taking rather the smaller ticket, but in the end, we could have raised a significant amount of money more, but we had already kind of agreed that probably the same as you guys with Binance. So we pretty much knew that there would be massive demand for the Access token, and that the initial kind of raise would not be the problem. So we were actually trying to avoid selling any more than we absolutely had to. So what happens next, we'll see. But for us, I mean, as you guys, we're in it for the long run. We want to build something great. And when it comes to these investors that we have on board, everyone is also very long-term oriented and believe that the things that we are creating here will probably set the standard for like both gaming products and I think DeFi projects for probably the next decade. I think it's incredibly exciting to be working in the space. And without these investors that we have, I don't think we would have gotten so far. And the introductions they're making, and also other things that are kind of not announced yet, will be cool to share once that is live.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. We're looking forward to that as well. All right.
Yeah, I would say that most of our investors have contributed really significant value to us. Kind of starting from like Binance incubation back in like 2018, it helped us kind of like shift our direction, going from a super, I would say, like research focused, like technical project that cares too much about academic purity instead of any type of like practical go to market. So it helped us like hone the direction, actually go about, how to build a proper exchange, what are the core stakeholders. And from that point on, we started building and eventually, onboarding. We kind of went like a really strategic approach when it comes to fundraising, and decided to onboard a lot of market makers in the space, especially for the mid-sized to large-sized ones. Essentially, our purpose behind that is to make sure that any exchange can work with any market maker anytime. But in order for them to really care about the exchange you're working with, in order for them to really care about a project, they really need to be like the backer extremely early on. So that's what I'm really excited about, especially when it comes to mainnet, is having that really strong liquidity on day one from all of our existing early believers. Another approach we really want to have is to just kind of onboard and work with as many partners as possible. Hash is a great partner. They have a lot of existing relationships and kind of influence within Korea, which is one of the stronger markets we really want to target. Obviously Binance, being one of the biggest exchanges out there, can already provide a lot of value. OKEX as well. So I'm really excited about just in general, what the synergies our investors can bring, because they've already helped us so much so far, and we haven't really, and we're only in testing stage.
That's super exciting. I can't wait for mainnet. So another interesting point now is ETH 2.0 has been a really hot topic lately. And I'd like to open up the space to discuss how the DeFi space will be impacted with the recent 2.0 launch. Maybe, Eric, you can start us off.
Yeah. I think the coolest part about ETH 2.0, especially for Beacon Chain's launch, is that we started seeing a lot of slashing, actually a surprising amount. So it kind of goes to show that there's different implementations going on, and a lot of them are like kind of imperfect. Last I checked, I think at like 4 a.m. When I wasn't sleeping, it was I could see at least like 50 to 100 validators already being slashed. A byte, there's like 2,000 of them, but I feel like, just in general, the return profile for an ETH validator and, kind of like the final form of the, ETH 2.0 ecosystem is going to be kind of drastically different from like what we see right now. So staking derivatives is going to be extremely interesting. I would say the return profile for ETH 2.0 used to be kind of certain, but I would say like right now, maybe just because of a bumpy launch, so people have to factor in slashing. But if slashing becomes baked into part of the equation for an expected validated return, then we would have to. Then it makes like just in general, the staking returns a lot more probabilistic. There's a lot of speculation on it, so I feel like staking derivative becomes a lot more interesting at that point. Another thing is that I would say, kind of like for NFTs and for DeFi and just in general, even though the finality is roughly the same, the throughput has been increased, dramatically by, the Beacon chain plus sharding eventually that comes soon. So I would say that, gas is no longer going to be a significant issue. It won't be baked into part of the cost of traders and everyone. So I feel like that's going to be really exciting. And XDAI as a layer 2 solution has already surpassed Ethereum mainnet transaction count. So I'm really excited to see what happens when Ethereum mainnet itself has that increased throughput. What are the possibilities? What are the volumes they're going to bring to DeFi?
Yeah.
Actually, I was following that launch very closely. I even claimed that NFT, the POAP badge for the launch on XDAI. So, yeah, I can say that at long last, ETH is progressing. I think everyone has been waiting on this since 2018, Casper, whatever. It's just been a tremendous longer time than we had expected coming into this space when we started building our thing. I remember we were incredibly bullish about ETH. Skip to the harsh reality that things take a significantly long time to build in the space. So I think on a more conservative side, I still believe we are several years out of something that's actually working in the way that a lot of people might be envisioning right now if you come in and you're new to the space. So I'm not too convinced yet. I think this is a great first step. And I think that I was watching also some slashing. Yeah, I think that's acceptable. It's just the way it is when it's an early network. Things will be a little bit rocky. But all in all, I'm very happy about the immediate launch. When it comes to gas issues and how that will turn out in the end, I mean, we don't really know how popular the new internet will be, whether or not that's going to be on Ethereum or where it will be. But Web3 certainly will have massive implications of the lives of traditional or normal people, even though they probably won't realize that. So I mean, I still believe, like, I think we will need layer 2 scaling solution regardless of what's happening. I don't believe that everything should be on Ethereum mainnet. Some things might need it, especially for NFTs. Like, it doesn't make much sense to have if you find a cherry inside a game, put that on mainnet Ethereum for the security. I mean, no, that's just not a thing. For DeFi, more generally, I can say that yes, as the transactions goes, the value of the transaction goes up. You guys definitely need to have the security of a layer 1 chain in some sense integrated. But how you guys will figure that out, I am very excited to see, because I think Tascha also mentioned the scariness of what's happening in terms of when people are attacking these DeFi protocols with flash loans and all these things. They're trying to abuse the systems. Even though if you just have one smaller thing, you have no idea how this can turn out in the long run for the entire protocol. So yeah, I for ETH2 specifically, 2-3 couple of years out, maybe then we'll see something more useful. It's a good start, but all in all, I don't see anything big changing on the very short-term horizon for us, at least. The same strategy. Just like, yeah, sure. Just keep going, please. Let's go.
Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, I agree. I also share the similar views as Alexander. I mean, Ethereum is a huge network, so it will definitely take a lot of effort and time to kind of migrate that to ETH 2.0. And I think while that is happening, what we're going to see, which is something that I'm also looking forward to, is, the launch of multiple chains, the multiple L2s that are coming to be live next year. So I think that will actually make a lot of, near-term impact on how DeFi space will look like. And I'm really excited to see, DeFi really growing beyond Ethereum and pretty much tapping into other chains and leveraging the benefits of the other chains, and as a whole, grow DeFi space in general.
Yeah, speaking of, I'm curious to hear what you guys think are the most underrated DeFi and NFT projects in this space currently.
Other than ourselves?
Yes.
I was just thinking, Axie, that's the...
Everyone was prepared to speak about. Yes. Any underrated projects that you guys think has been flowing under the radar that our viewers might not know about yet and should keep an eye out for?
For me myself, I actually think what's interesting is going to be, the growth of ecosystem of multiple DeFi projects. So similar to what Yearn is doing with, Sushi, with Pickle, with Curve, with a number of projects. I think, that is setting the new standard for DeFi in terms of, hijacking that growth. And what comes out of that little ecosystem will be something that I'm really looking forward to. And I think this is similar to how Alpha Finance Lab also approach building the products and working with multiple projects. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to how each DeFi project can contribute and really help grow DeFi space in general. So the interesting part, in my opinion, will be how each modular project will find a way to work together and grow and create a new design space for DeFi.
It's very interesting because in the NFT space, I think things are very, a lot younger than in the DeFi space, because you guys can all do all these composable things, and it actually makes sense because it brings value to your platforms occasionally. At least people are using your products and giving you guys more volume. For the NFT space, what we're seeing is actually could see more hostile things happening. So, for example, if people are allowing you to pay with your specific NFT and then they burn that for their new asset, for example, I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? We haven't seen that happen yet, but I can see that is something that can happen. And I'm not bullish on interoperability between NFT projects quite yet. I do believe it's quite dangerous actually for game projects specifically to work together, because right now the pie is so small that there might be, let's say in Axie, we have 20,000 wallet holders, and the maximum maybe in the space there are 40,000, 50,000 who are interested in NFTs for now. For us to spend a significant amount of resources interacting with another game is so, the ROI is so significant, low, that it's not even worth it for us at this stage. So it's too early for the NFT space to do the same kind of, to have that same bullish thesis as I believe Tascha has for the DeFi space. So what I would say is that I'm more interested in finding other projects who are embracing the ethos of Web3 in the same way that we're doing in Axie, where they want to allow people to yield farm their own, the governance token inside their game, and they're putting all the revenue streams into that specific asset. And I mean everything. I don't mean you're taking some for the equity, some for whatever. No, just put everything inside the community treasury and then let the community control that eventually down the line. That's something I'm bullish on. But for specific games, there are a few. There is one project which is called Ember Sword that I don't think too many people know about outside of the space, but they have some pretty kick-ass graphics that I think could be nice, and they're an experienced smaller team. So I'm excited to see where that leads. Not sure if they will do it the way that I want them to, but I'm trying to push them into that direction. But yeah, there are things happening, but it's still early, I would say, in NFT space. I'm more bullish on art actually, because I think it's easier just to do. Just if you're an artist, you come in and you can see that you can build your brand as an artist because it derives from the IP that you are creating. Everything is easy to see. Okay, my name is Alex. I've created these 10 art pieces. I've signed them with my key. so people can see that that is actually me, and that actually gives it value if I have other places to show them on Twitter or whatever that might be. So those are my thoughts on the NFT space right now.
Thank you, Alexander. Eric?
Yeah, so for the gaming side, I actually really love this game called Dark Forest. It's really interesting, and it actually uses XI for scaling as well. I'm also like a really big like Three Body fan, so that's probably why I like that game so much. And just in general, like for NFT, I feel like the most exciting part is definitely the artist side. Essentially, that's kind of like a translation of human capital and artistic talent that's being converged on like a digital space. So essentially, like let's say one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, and it probably won't happen, but it's been keeping me up at night, is that I really hope that like Banksy or like someone like that could like just burn their artwork and just create like a digitized like NFT for that specific artwork. That would be super cool.
Yeah.
And just in general for DeFi, I feel like one of the so this is kind of like relevant to what we're building right now, and that's why I'm kind of bullish about like this specific subsector of projects, which is staking derivatives. It's because for us, INJ has to be staked within the proof-of-stake consensus, and obviously that's being locked up, or else what's the point? But we also have like a governance process, that involves sometimes for big decisions that could involve the stake INJs. So it creates a weird kind of like perverse incentive. Like sometimes if the governance decision is so big that it affects a lot of elements, whereas the stake INJs could just like, yeah, screw it, let's just forward 2/3 votes, let's go. So we decided to kind of like go for like a staking derivative model in the store / like a staking derivative approach to it. And obviously, we started seeing that, it's honestly a very fascinating concept just in general to think about, how the greater ecosystem looks like after this. And honestly, especially for like Yearn and for all these projects, they're so locked up within the liquidity mining. I feel like there could be, extra liquidity if you were to tokenize those positions. So I feel like some projects like Ramp or like Staffy, they could bring, really interesting values to the ecosystem.
Yeah. Sorry. I just want to say something before we kind of before we end it, because what you're saying there for Yearn, I think they're doing something really amazing with the Y insurance, for example. And that's something that I think is great, combining NFT with DeFi, so that you can trade these insurance positions for various. It's just a good way of doing it. And lastly, what you said about Banksy, it's cool with what's possible with pseudo anonymity. So basically, the fact that you can start building your brand from scratch, and then nobody knows who you are. All the things that they can see is the original artwork. They can backwards trace that on the internet. And if it's nowhere to be found, then that's you. That's your identity. From that point on, you can start building and building and building. And it doesn't matter who you are. Everyone is just looking at what you are producing. And that's so just insane. I think that's great. And I can't wait to see these artists come on board and just shock the world. And we are seeing someone, I think Pak is a good example, the man behind the ArtCollect Twitter account and Instagram, if you guys are not familiar with that. But yeah, he's doing some really amazing work. So yeah, it's just, really cool to be working here. I'm so excited about the future.
I think we started having like virtual streaming, which is even cooler. So you can essentially have like a pseudonymous personality or a completely anonymous personality and just like interact with the audience, stream with the audience, usually as you would like, but instead, you have like a digital like persona with it, which is like really fascinating to me.
Yeah, they're also creating, just to add on, because I'm so excited about this as well, they're creating digital worlds where you can go in and see different studios of artwork, which I think is really exciting. And then to see that kind of, it looks a lot like some games that you see online as well. So it's interesting to see both the artwork side with the VR side, with the gaming side come together. And with NFTs, the future is definitely going to be really, really fun. So moving on, what do you guys, so every project here is a part of the Binance family, which is one of the titans in this industry. All of you have also conducted an IEO on Binance. So I'd like each of you to share how you see Binance mission aligning with your project, and how have or will you leverage your relationship with Binance? And last but not least, the third question that I'd like you guys to target is where you see your relationship with Binance going. And Eric, I know that you guys have already gone through it, so perhaps you can start.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of obvious synergies because they're an exchange, probably like the titans of the centralized exchange world, and we're focusing on like a specific niche within this bigger exchange umbrella. So definitely, just in general, there's a lot of synergies we could see, interacting with the Binance community, interacting with the Binance users, and just learning from, people within Binance more about, how they manage their operations, how they grow. A lot of interesting lessons actually from the Binance Future side and just in general, really cool stuff on the BSC and also Binance Chain side. So we're actually, working on some pretty cool bridges with BSC right now that we can see have a lot of potential, which could be just as fun as our existing ETH Pexo.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, Binance is, has been really helpful in a number of ways, right? Their community is large, and how we, kind of have the same mission or alignment in our goals is, our really long, down the line goal for Alpha Finance Lab is to onboard more retail users from traditional finance to DeFi. That's a really, really long time from now, right? But what we think is that, the first place where these retail users from traditional finance would enter would be the centralized exchange. So how we will help is pretty much to bridge that gap between CeFi and DeFi and eventually bring on more users to DeFi and not just grow the usage among the current users, but we have to continue growing the space, growing the number of users itself. So I think that's the mission of Binance for sure, growing the users of traders and also of users who are using the centralized exchange, and then eventually moving on to DeFi and leveraging the Binance Smart Chain and Binance chains that they have. For the second point that you mentioned of how we're, on a near term, how we're leveraging their network and relationship that we have. So this will come in for the perpetual swap product that we're building, as we are building on both Binance Smart Chain and Ethereum. So that will also help Binance users to also have another solution for them to, trade perpetual swap on Binance Smart Chain, as they are already in the Binance network. So that would be more of a near term as opposed to the first point.
Awesome. Alex?
Yeah, I think the most obvious synergy for Axie is actually getting the word out to traditional traders. So when you are in the NFT space, you generally are a little bit in the corner, if you know what I'm saying. You aren't really noticed by anyone else outside the NFT space. So traditional traders like, I can't trade, can't speculate, whatever these geeks are doing, it doesn't matter. I feel like that's been the traditional way of looking at NFTs for a few years right now. But what's happened is that now that people are starting to realize that it's possible to do more things than just kind of speculate on a collectible, like art and, as I said, game assets that actually have some serious gaming power within them. It makes more sense to turn on the marketing a little bit. And that's also why we wanted to partner with Binance. So we could probably have launched Axie Infinity, the token sale on Uniswap, and raised the same amount of capital. I don't think that would have been a problem at all, given the amount of traction that we had before the sale. But that would have not got us the same amount of traction within the traditional kind of the crypto investor. And it would not give us the stamp of approval from people who are a little bit curious and skeptical maybe of the NFT space. Not talking about those who are working within the crypto space, because I think the general consensus is quite clear. People understand the use cases for NFTs, at least to a certain extent. But traditional crypto traders, they haven't even heard about NFTs, that they couldn't care less, really. So that was kind of why we wanted to work with Binance. And of course, the reputation and the fact that they are so aggressive with many things that they do. I think that also reflects well our opinion on the space and how we like to do business. We're very aggressive. We try to seek opportunities wherever they are. We do partnerships with, like you mentioned, Aave, and then we were early on with MakerDAO, for example, where people who had a CDP open, they could claim a specific NFT item in Axie. These are things that nobody had ever else done before. When it comes to the future with Axie and Binance, I actually can't say too much. Things are happening there too, but that would be a massive leak. So I will have to keep that under the hood for now. But some cool things are happening. We're excited to see where NFTs and Binance, how that works on Binance Smart Chain too. I can see that they're doing some other things with Alpaca and some other guys. I mean, that's okay. But for Axie, we have higher hopes in the long term. So.
Awesome. Okay, last question. I'm interested to hear from you guys what keeps you up at night relative to today's discussion of DeFi, NFTs, and yield farming.
I'm pretty sure me and Tascha will have the same answer here, but you can begin, Tascha, so I can answer.
Well, apart from this, very interesting talk that we're talking, typically what keeps me up at night is coffee, right? But, in general, DeFi space, I think it's really, 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 really interesting, from a number of angles. Number one is you always see new projects coming out doing different things all the time. So I can spend time at night, reading up on new projects, reading up on, what they're trying to solve. And how we can help and how we can contribute, or even that can ring another bell of, oh, there's another problem that we did not see before. So I think having all these innovative ideas coming and popping up almost every day, that keeps me pretty energetic, and also trying to see how we can innovate Alpha Finance, together with the other projects.
Okay, I was wrong, because what I was thinking was, what keeps me up at night is nightmares about smart contracts being hacked, losing my users. Like, that's literally probably the most scary thing that I can imagine. Every hack I see, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's great for the space," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, these people are smart. Smart people get hacked all the time. Like, people lose their funds for their users. There are no guarantees that we can see everything that's wrong or right with a smart contract, even if they have been audited, even if they haven't been in play for several years. So that's probably what I'm keeping a bit, like, on the negative side, because I think that could set us back for several years. Not only actually, but also in general for bigger decentralized exchanges. Let's say Uniswap, or where there is a significant amount of money that's being transacted every day. I think it's insanely scary to think about. In terms of on the positive side, there are too many good things to say that makes it worth it, that outweighs these negative things. I think we've touched upon them in this conversation, so I won't go back into that. But yeah, the probably the most scary thing is smart contract risk, because I don't think anyone can truly see exactly where this will go in the short and medium term.
Yeah, I agree. Just in general, that's definitely one of the main things that keeps me up at night, especially when you're having a testnet during our internal testing phases, when we run into like EVM transaction revert, which is probably the scariest thing ever, because that means that you have to go back to the smart contract, figure out exactly where it went wrong, and probably redeploy everything. And especially for something as complicated as what we're working on, a lot of things could go wrong. And so I would say another really scary thing is just that there's a lot of black swan events, especially for basically for the entire DeFi system. Price could swing by 30%, and half the DeFi totally value will be gone. There's so much liquidations going on. It's not being a lot of times Maker had a few failures on that front as well. So that certainly keeps me up at night. I would say that if we do a lot of agent-based simulation and a lot of the existing, DeFi protocols, a lot of them might not necessarily stand up to the test. And also a lot of them might not even stand up to, a financial audit in a sense, where flash loan attack could happen every day. I feel like just in general, a lot of the financial design for a lot of these DeFi protocols are not necessarily mature, and they don't fully understand, the attack vector, and, just in general, the Oracle choice, the importance behind having a diversified Oracle, the importance behind having, specific measures like TWAB and everything, just how important that is for a lot of, younger DeFi projects.
I mean, even older ones, Compound.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to shame anyone, but I mean, come on, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually, when we were doing research on the funding rate calculation, we actually considered very seriously on the Coinbase Oracle. But we checked out the specific like price specification, and it just wasn't like necessarily like a good fit. If it was Binance doing the same thing, we would have slightly more confidence on it. But since Coinbase doesn't necessarily have, it's not necessarily like the hub for all the liquidity and volume, that was one concern we had. But for most intents and purposes, it's good enough. Obviously, Compound had this black swan, which is very hard to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I of course agree that it was a black swan event, but I mean, these things can be at least somewhat thought of, and it was an attack vector that was mentioned. So, I mean, of course, I think everyone is disappointed, but that's kind of just the way it goes. Compound seems to have been recovering just quite nicely, and I guess they did. There might be things that we don't know also about why they made their decisions. So I think it's too easy to sit outside and judge. We get judged all the time. And it's not like I as the CEO and co-founder, can say everything and why we made all these decisions. It doesn't necessarily make sense. So it's very easy to say, oh, you guys should have just done that. I mean, if it was that easy, they would probably have done it from beforehand. So
yeah. Oh, that makes 100% sense.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I'd like to thank our speakers and our viewers for joining us on today's talk. Really excited to see how these 3 projects are going to advance and accelerate the growth in the crypto space. Thanks again, guys. Hope you guys have a lovely day or night wherever you are in the world, and stay healthy.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.